heard about organic products today a number of times. So it's interesting to hear about these products in the next panel. This event is so interesting that it makes me think that each one of the panels should be an event in itself. Maybe these will be replicated into standalone events that are more focused, so we can optimize so much of the knowledge that has been presented here. There is so much knowledge so far. So once again, I now give the floor to Raquel Prado. She's here. I see her here. Also, Professor Cornelia Smalia. I'm not sure if she's there. And let's wait for the participants to join us. And we are now just waiting for Professor Cornelia.
Good morning. I've seen Cornelia, I've seen Mateo. Now we are just waiting for Raquel. Raquel is here, I see her name. Just waiting for the image to open up. Hi, Raquel, there you are.
Então, o time está completo.
Okay, we have the entire team with us now, and the topic couldn't be more important, which is soil health. Raquel, you're going to open this extremely important and strategic panel, and once more, I will ask you, sorry to concentrate please on the time allotted to you in the 10 minutes, but later we will have one event that is only solely for soil health, and you have all the time you deserve. Can you hear me well? Yes, we can. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Raquel Prado. I am researcher at Embrapa Solos. I would like to thank Green Rio for inviting me on behalf of the Embrapa Solos team to present the work we've been doing here to you. Remember that Embrapa Solos works with soils and soil health under several aspects. The topic I am bringing to you today is soil health, security, and ecosystem services. So, speaking of soil health, what exactly is this concept? It's the continuous capacity of soil to work as a live and vital system, always within the limits of the ecosystem, of course, and based on soil or use. This concept is very much related to the security and services of ecosystems and soils. A healthy soil can retain water, can maintain organic matter, it maintains biodiversity, reduces the corrosive processes and soil loss, among other functions. This way, it ensures agriculture to be carried out, as well as other human activities. The concept of soil security is a more comprehensive concept, and it considers quality and health of soils. The dimensions of soil security are capacity, conditions, capital, connectivity, and coding. It also has to do with the other security aspects such as water, energy, food, and also other ecosystem services of the soil. These can be defined as benefits for society that come from the properties, conditions, and processes of soils in a healthy ecosystem. So there are scientific authorities, for example, such as Bob Watson from the International Platform for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. They highlight aspects such as what Bob says, that we are losing carbon in the soils, which undermines agricultural productivity and contributes toward climate change. So it's very necessary to restore the degraded soils that we have. Heatlh et al. Of 2015 says that the soil is a component that is neglected in the ecosystem services and in political decisions. So what determines the functions, ecosystem functions and services of the soil? Well, when we think about agriculture and cattle raising, both based on the types of soils, their characteristics and biotas, but also based on the impact of agricultural practices and live and cattle raising practices. So depending on the way in which you practice agriculture, this is going to reflect on the soil's ecosystem services. Soils have an entire complexity of ecosystem services and functions. And this is what this image shows, the entire complexity and the interrelations that soils have in their matrix. Can everyone hear me? I'm just checking the sound. We can hear you very well, and we are very interested in what you're saying. Sometimes we get the sensation that it may have frozen or dropped out. So sorry, I just wanted to check. Please go ahead, it's perfect. So soils are also an example of multifunctionality because through the interactions of functions and flows of soils, that's how we provide the essential ecosystem services to all. So we can see carbon sequestration, climate change, water infiltration in the soil, depletion of nutrients, erosion, maintenance of biota, among many others, climate regulation, etc. So just to highlight that several studies, programs, and projects that are internationally renowned have this approach. And the FAO is a highlight here. Brazil, in turn, has technologies and has adopted conservationist practices in agriculture and cattle raising that can increase or maintain the soil's ecosystem services. And the highlight is the integration between agriculture, crops, and forests, which has expanded a lot in the country, especially in the Cerrado region. The technology which has revolutionized the sector in Brazil, and also agricultural and forest systems, which are in expansion. And it's a solution for sustainability of agriculture, but also need adaptations for the different production systems and for the different Brazilian biomes. Brazil also has public policies that can contribute to the soil's ecosystem service. So I wanted to bring you the ABC plan that has to do with. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Raquel. I'm so interested in what you're saying. I wanted to know if you are actually sharing all your slides because we're just looking at the first one. All we see is your first slide. So a lot of people are asking me, where are the other slides? We want to see more. Are you the one controlling them or? Yes, I am controlling them. We only see the first slide. How about now? Go one more, please. All we see is your cover slide. All right, we see it now. You can continue. Thank you and sorry to interrupt you. It's just that it's so interesting that it would be a pity not to be able to follow your presentation visually. Okay, well, this is where I was talking about the technologies adopted by Brazil for more sustainable production of agriculture and cattle raising, and also in terms of public policies. Can you see the slide now? The public policy slide. Can you see that one? Well, then we have the ABC plan, which is one of these public policies. It's an instrument of the national climate change policy, and it encourages conservationist practices for a low carbon agriculture. And also Prona Solos, which is the national soil program, and it organizes several Brazilian institutions. Raquel, I am so sorry to interrupt you, but the slide we are seeing is soil complexity, and it is not public
Não, a gente
policy
precisa
slide.
aqui da técnica, a gente precisa de um sinal para passar para o próximo slide.
The technical staff is saying that they need to know when they should pass the slides. I see. I have to help the technical staff. Let's go on to public policies, Zazimo, please. One more. Here we go. Public policies. Thank you. Okay, so going on, I was talking about the ABC plan and now the National Program for Soils, the Prona Solos, where several institutions are being brought in together, national institutions, to expand national soil information, to organize it and disseminate, and supporting public policies. So what have we done about it? Well, we've been trying to quantify and value the soil ecosystem services, but we do have several constraints and challenges, such as, for example, metrics and methods that can be affordable for decision makers and can be low cost. So this makes our work a bit more difficult, and we should advance in this aspect. Also, very few papers have actually evaluated soil services. So we do need to progress under that aspect as well. And we also have, also need data for modeling and mapping soil ecosystem services. And this is especially at greater detail scales or local scales. And finally, we have as the major challenge to give visibility and support decisions related to soil ecosystem services, which is very important in the decision-making processes. I've brought here papers that bring more information in terms of what I've just said. And finally, there are several topics that are opportunities that we have with German research institutions. We do have partnerships already with some institutions, and the topics that are related, which we could work on, are recarbonization of global soils, the nationally determined contributions from the Paris Agreement, or the Paris Accords, the carbon and other green markets. We can also evaluate soil ecosystem services, trade-offs, and synergies, and we should also promote landscape multifunctionality, have a more diverse and more multifunctional agriculture, which therefore would promote several ecosystem services. And finally, I'd like to thank the entire team of from Embrapa Solos who've been working hard in this topic.
Você está
Atraso.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the problem with the slides. You have an amazing team. It's a great honor to have you representing Embrapa Soils here with us. So continuing, Cornelia, you have the floor.
I hope so.
I think my
Zózimo, por favor,
presentation
a
is the view.
apresentação da Cornélia.
I will say próximo.
Isso. Alô, apresentação da Cornélia. Cornélia, it's coming. I hope so.
Interesting.
Cornélia. Só um minuto que a gente já está subindo a apresentação.
Tá bom.
We're just about to load your presentation.
There you are, Cornélia.
Okay. Bom dia
Bom
para
dia.
todos. Today I will talk about a topic for which we have quite a number of research projects, and actually also in the past we had quite a lot of collaboration with different countries in South America, in particular also with Brazil. So towards more sustainable agriculture through managing the soil microbiome. So we are moving in the same direction as the first talk. Próximo slide. Próximo.
Próximo, por favor.
Próximo.
Alô? Aí.
Okay, so just as a background, obviously we are all aware of the fact that there is a decline of soil health as a result of agriculture intensification. We see typically loss of soil organic carbon, loss of soil biodiversity, loss of soil fertility, erosion and accumulation of pathogens and agrochemicals. And therefore, there's quite an urgent need for soil restoration and sustainable plant production. Próximo.
Próximo. Alô, turma. Aí.
Okay, so because we are now moving to the microbiome, I just want to say a few words about the soil microbiota. So we have in a gram of soil more than 200 meters of fungal hyphae. We have 10 to the 9 bacterial cells and 10 to the 4 bacterial species per gram of soil. And they are colonizing actually only quite minute soil surface, but they have fundamental ecosystem functions. So they are contributing to carbon and nutrient cycling, to plant growth and health, to soil structure, to pollutant degradation, and to climate regulation. And therefore we have to be very worried if there is a problem with our soils, and therefore we do have to manage the soil microbiome. And actually in Germany we do have a bioeconomy program financed which is called Bonares, and we were lucky enough to have 2 Bonares projects, and I will briefly present them to you. Próximo. So how to do, okay. So how does agriculture management influence the soil microbiome and plant growth and yield? And how can we manage this soil microbiome? And there are different options. They are going from organic amendments, cover crops, changing tillage practice, crop rotation, and inoculants. And exploring plant microbe interactions for improving agriculture productivity and sustainability. This is really our goal. So Próximo. The first Bonares project I want to present to you, this is a huge research group, and this is about overcoming replant disease by an integrated approach. And actually, we tried here to unravel the etiology and also the causes of replant diseases. So replant disease is probably quite well known for some of you, but not for all. That's why I want to briefly say that if you plant, for instance, apple, where was an apple before, you are typically facing huge problems and we see very damaged roots. So we do need to develop strategy to maintain and restore soil health. and provide management tools and to overcome these replant diseases, which we also see when we have short rotations. So it's not specifically for apple, it's just like an example. And we want to develop tools for communication of the knowledge from basic research to farmers. Next slide, Proximo. So deciphering etiology of apple replant disease, and actually I think this slide really nicely shows what I mean here. And this is on the right hand side we have this apple replant disease soil, and on the left hand we have soil from the same site. And in the middle, in the split root experiment, we do have an apple plant. And I think it's pretty impressive to see how much the health or the soil matters. Because we have damaged roots on the one side, and on the other side we have pretty healthy roots. And we see a huge reduction of root length, for instance, and proximal sledger. And of course, we were using next generation sequencing techniques to unravel what is going on with respect to the microbiome. And actually here you see, this is a so-called heat map. We used total community DNA, did 16S sequencing, and on the left-hand side, you do have this healthy soil, the grass soil, from the same site, but never seen an apple before. And on the right-hand side, you see the ARD soil, the apple replant disease soil. And you can see it's like black and white. So the microbiome of the same plant, the roots going on the one hand to the ARD, on the other hand to the grassland soil is difficult, completely different. And we see here that there are some responders like streptomyces and variovorax. So we are trying to identify the main player. Proximo slider. So another project which we also have here in this Bonares program, it's called Decontrol, and for both projects you can find very nice websites where you can find the main ideas about this. So here this is about the impact of long-term agriculture management practices on the soil and the rhizosphere microbiome and on plant health. And the nice thing of these projects is that we are groups of different, which have different expertise and health, others on the root exudation pattern, and others work on the establishment and of the microbiome in the rhizosphere and suppressiveness. Proximo slide. So what we learned in this project is really how important long-term field sites are. So long-term field sites have the advantage that for decades, researchers applied certain practices, and we can just harvest now the soil and get an idea how, for instance, tillage or fertilization strategies or reduced fertilization without fungicides, how this affects the microbiome. And on the right-hand side, you see a kind of constrained analysis of principal components. This is the microbiome here of the different field sites, and we can clearly see that we have a distinct microbiome in the soil for the different treatments. So what we are doing with management is reflected in the composition of the microbiome. Proximo slide. So we took these soils from the site to the greenhouse, and we planted on the soil lettuce as an indicator plant. And then we analyzed plant performance, root exudation, and also the microbiome. Proximo slide. And again, you can see, even if you take these soils from the field to the greenhouse and you plant newly, you see that the soil has a memory effect. And it's quite impressive that in the greenhouse we can still distinguish, for instance, the pre-crop, which was either oilseed rape or wheat. And we can, of course, distinguish also between the treatments cultivator versus mouthblow. And we have some typical responders which we can identify, and this is of course quite helpful for future strategies. Proximo slide. Of course, this is what is interesting for the farmer. So the soil comes from the same site and has just seen different agricultural management. And here you can see that the shoot fresh mass of the lettuce for pre-crop wheat and pre-crop oilseed rape, we can nicely see that the extensive variant typically had better growth. So the extensive variant means reduced nitrogen fertilization and no fungicides. And this is in particular impressive for the wheat as pre-crop. So we do see this, we repeated this experiments for 3 years, and actually we always found quite similar results, quite reproducible, showing there is a memory of the soil microbiome. So next slide, proximo slide. So of course, at the end, you have to go to the field. And in the second phase of our project, we are doing research in the field in collaboration with different groups again. And we have, for instance, things like root windows, because we know that the exudates which come out from the plant, they are actually triggering all these effects on the microbiome assembly. And proximo slide. So we have also a collaboration project, JKI and India, and this is just one glimpse of this project where people try to restore soil health by using different management tools, like for instance in reducing tillage, but also adding, for instance, manure or compost. And the interesting thing here is that we see differences in the aggregate composition. So, and at that site, we had also a natural site, and we can see where we have no agriculture, we have really big aggregates as a dominant fraction, while in the conventional tillage with mineral fertilizer, these big aggregates are virtually gone. And this is, of course, explaining why this whole thing like erosion plays such a big role. Proximo slide. So when we look at this, the soil microbiome is, of course, very highly diverse. So we are also talking about diversity here. And we do have mainly the good guys. They are important for tolerance of the plant against abiotic stress. They promote growth and development, nutrient acquisition, for instance. But they are also, of course, bad guys. They are bad guys for the plant, but also bad guys for human health. So that's why we have to keep in mind that the effect of long-term agriculture management on the soil microbiome is conveyed to the plant of the next plantation via the rhizosphere microbiome. And this has implication for plant performance. Proximo slide. So 2 slides about inoculants, because with Brazil, I mainly collaborated about inoculants. And this is one EU project where we used various inoculants, which were all commercial strains. And we could really nicely see if you have non-optimal fertilized soils, inoculants really do a lot. They help to increase the growth of plants quite impressively. And these plants are impressively different from the non-inoculated ones, which is the B0. And on the right-hand side, what I can't see quite well, you see a confocal laser scanning microscope picture, which shows that these inoculants are, of course, not evenly distributed along the route, but quite patchy. Proximo slide. So another example of research is a biocontrol approach using now amplicon sequencing to get an idea what is going on when we inoculate potential biocontrol strains. On this TCR, this dark yellow panel, you see on the right-hand side these poor plants, wilted plants because of Ralstonia solanacearum. I know in Brazil you have also problems with Ralstonia. And there you can see that the dominant OTUs which we had in the soil were indeed Ralstonia solanacearum, so up to 50% in the rhizosphere. The same treatment, but just inoculated with a bacillus strain B63, you see only very few sequences, and you see no wilting. And it shows us quite nicely that abundance and the number of cells we have of a potential pathogen really matters. And at the bottom you have the Pseudomonas inoculated strains, and also these plants look very healthy and have a drastically reduced number of Ralstonia left. Proximo slide. So for inoculants, what is important is that they have rhizocompetence, and we have to think about their mode of action. So the plant and its microbiome, they have to somehow work or interact with each other. And this rhizosphere microbiome is obviously influenced by the soil type, by the plant species, by the plant growth stage, and the cultivar. And this might all influence also the ecology of the inoculant on one side, and on the other hand, of the pathogens. So for inoculants, it is very important that we overcome the present, at least in Europe, problems with registration, because for biostimulants, so those strains which help to overcome abiotic stress, we typically need very little registration, while for biocontrol strains, it's really a lot what you need to provide, and not always meaningful. And interestingly, most biostimulants and biocontrol strains, so they have both options, so they can do both. Proximo slide. In November last year, still before Corona, luckily, we had a very nice INIA JKI workshop in Montevideo. And we had also a couple of Brazilian colleagues, maybe you recognize already some of them. Tsai, for instance, on the right corner is down there, but there were also Silvia Moraes de Souza from Embrapa Milho e Sorgo. There was Lucas Mendes and Diego Acevedo from Uva Arjoto. So this was actually a workshop where we really exchanged quite nicely our research for the topic towards more sustainable agriculture through managing the soil microbiome. And this was hopefully also the start for some collaboration between JKI and Brazil. So Proximo slide. With that, I am at the end. You see there are a long list of people who contributed to the work I'm presented. And with that, I thank you for your attention. Muito obrigada.
Obrigada, Cornélia. Ótima apresentação.
Thank you, Cornelia. Your presentation was wonderful. I am very happy to have your institute here with us.
E dando continuidade a essa nossa discussão.
So, continuing with our discussion that Cornelia showed so well, the difference between a sick and a healthy soil. It's like an organism, a live organism, a body basically, and we don't really, realize that, and she showed us in a brilliant manner. So congratulations. Well, you speak very well too.
Então, depois dessa apresentação, gostaria de passar para o Dematê.
So now I would like to give the floor to our next speaker, Luis de Mate. He is president of the Technical Chamber for Agriculture, for Organic Agriculture. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. This is a fantastic panel, and Raquel and Cornelia offered very interesting elements. Before I start my presentation, I'd like to highlight a bit of what Raquel said in terms of functionality. I think this is a work that was part of my doctorate, and it's fantastic. It's something that we really should try to understand more in biodiversity. Also, what happens in terms of landscape. One very important thing which you mentioned is the boundaries, the limits of our ecosystems. And I think it's part of a fundamental part of our research today to understand better the boundaries, the limits of our ecosystems and of the productive systems we implement. If we don't know what the limits or constraints are, then we start demanding too much and we end up creating externalities. So this was something she commented as well. In terms of what Cornelia said, I thought that the soil memory was something fantastic. It's something that we also work on and based on agriculture. So let me go on to my presentation. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to start now. I am president of the thematic chamber of organic agriculture, and I'm also in one of the set of companies. Among these natural agricultural principles, which were created by a Japanese researcher, Mokichi Okada, I wanted to highlight something he said, which was his way of seeing soils as a living being, as living beings, which Bia just mentioned actually is part of an interpretation of what Cornelia also addressed. And Mokichi Okada talked a lot about this, embracing this principle as seeing the soil as a living being. So technically and scientifically, we would even say that soils are sentient beings. They are able to express feelings and understand what happens around in the surroundings. And it's based on this principle that we work and develop our projects. Okay, so over time, we have learned of all these issues that involve the impacts on soil. We have data that were very worked on since 2015 mainly. When the UN and the FAO were involved. And I'd like to highlight a point here, which is that in these solutions and in the management, sustainable management of soils, there are a series of topics that are listed there, but I'd like to add yet another one. If I had made this image, I would have added the bio inputs to this list. This is also something extremely important in the process, and the previous presentations did show and even confirm this situation. As I said, 2015 was the International Year of Soils. There are a series of papers and articles that were published and are being published, and we have a pretty bad scenario, bad situation in Brazil and in the world with a lot of soil loss and soil degradation processes. This is something I'm bringing you just so that we don't talk about too much theory or scientific papers, just to bring you some images here. I took these pictures 2 weeks ago when I was riding my bike in that region. And this is the scenario we see a lot, especially degraded pasture lands. Brazil has 200 million hectares in pasture lands. Obviously, not all of them are degraded, but a large part is suffering a chronic process of degradation. So imagine how great it would be to recover public policies to address this so that we could improve this scenario. Imagine the productivity we would get in these areas and how much we could recover. And we know that we have very interesting studies by Embrapa integrated with others that can generate very significant results in this matter. This is a very simple scenario I brought to show you, simply to understand that soils work in a very simple manner. We need to allow soil porosity so that oxygen can come in and CO2 can be removed from all the microbiological functioning that is happening. And this new image is a very typical scenario that we've been seeing, and I've seen this for over 30 years in my work in the field, which are these compactation lines or rows that end up happening due to wrong soil management. And this ends up creating a very difficult and complicated situation for microbiomes to develop. So a more balanced microbiome process or development is something that we need to preserve, and we need to have the necessary encouragement for that, stimulus for that, since this generates a more adequate nutrition for plants and therefore healthier and more balanced plants, which are much less dependent on chemical inputs, as is the case of the chemical agriculture inputs that we see and are concerned with because of their intensive overuse. Showing you a bit of our work now, and obviously it's essential what Cornelia and Raquel said before, that as you can see, we see two images here on the slide. One shows the layer of the green mass, which is the left side image, where you have an area with and without biological inputs. So you have a minority of the green mass. And on the other image, this is another layer of the image where we see water stocks or water storage. This happened by applying the first application actually of a biological input, and we already saw this change. These are some of the products we have. I'm not here to advertise anything. I'm just here to say that there are lines of developments with this intent and from other companies as well. And I'd like to show you a video. I hope it runs well here. It's extremely short, not even a minute. Actually, two videos, 1 minute each. And I will be close to the end of my presentation.
Demate, aumenta pouquinho o som para a gente ouvir o vídeo.
Is it possible to increase the volume?
Testei há pouco aqui.
Vai, entrou. Acho que está entrando.
De fato não está saindo o vídeo, eu não sei porquê, para mim também não. Não está saindo o vídeo, né, Bia?
Não, o vídeo
You can't see the video. We can see the video, but we cannot hear its sound. Yeah, it's just the technical guy reporting the benefits he observed on soils once biological inputs were used. So the only difference there was the use or not of bio inputs, and he's just showing that difference. The other video is in the plantation of vegetables.
Tá saindo som?
Can you hear the sound? And in English, you have the subtitles.
Eu testei tantas vezes. Mas ele está mostrando também esse mesmo cenário de áreas com...
He's basically showing the same scenario, areas with and without bio inputs, and the technician is going to share the soil's capacity and how soft it is. And the only difference really was from the use of biological inputs. It, it brought a huge improvement in the quality of the soil, and you can see the soil is much softer, much easier to penetrate. And this is the farmer showing how he felt this huge improvement from there. So I just wanted to highlight this simple fact that there was nothing done beyond using biological inputs. And so to conclude, in the thematic chamber of organic agriculture, we are very proud of this national biological inputs program, which was launched on May 27th by the Minister of Agriculture. In the last 6 years, we managed a project within the Ministry of Agriculture. So I was able to send letters to 3 different ministers in the Ministry of Agriculture to be able to enable this project, this biological input project, so that this activity could be better organized and better standardized in our country so that we can have a more innovative environment with more research, more development, and mainly so that it can reach farmers and contribute towards sustainable agriculture and reduce agriculture's dependence on chemical inputs, and increasing the capacity of the systems to regenerate and to produce adequate responses to all of the current needs of society around the world. So we have an enormous potential to promote soil improvements by using these biological inputs, and also by reducing chemical fertilizer that and toxins that bring significant impacts. And of course, the microbiome knowledge has shown us this very clearly. So that's what I wanted to bring you, and I thank you once again for inviting me to this meeting. Thank you very much, Demate. And I think the panel was very rich in every sense of the word.
Everyone brought a valuable contribution so that we can consider soil as a living being. If I can conclude this panel with a sentence, I would like to say, mention the moment when Demate said, we have to understand the limits, the boundaries. And I think this is an amazing lesson that this pandemic has taught us. We have to understand that we have limits, that we have to respect the limits of the soil use, of our limits, and nature teaches us in a very intelligent manner. Maybe we sometimes don't understand the message we get from nature. Once again, I would like to thank Raquel, Cornelia, Demate, and all the other speakers who are with us since 8:30 this morning. It was an enormous pleasure and a privilege to follow so many interesting presentations. And I'm sure that I will also learn to respect my limits and boundaries after the presentations. I hope we continue together. We will have a break now because we will have a next panel at 1 p.m., which is the chain of cosmetics and planetary boundaries. That's what we will be talking about later. So planetary boundaries and cosmetic chains. That's our next panel. It will be moderated by Rodrigo Costa from Ethical Biotrade Organization. We will have L'Oreal, Berac, and Senai. And then we will have another panel, which is well aligned with regional development, which is on regional development and bioeconomics. It will be moderated by Marco Pavarino from the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, and Supplies. And we will think about Mayor Guilherme Gazzola, who will think of a cluster for the region, and Márcio Espinosa from Fundação Araucária. So we have a very full day. Don't leave. You can leave quickly to have a bite of lunch, and please come back at 1 p.m. There's a lot still to come, and it's very important to have you all on board to help change the planet. We will see you in 15 minutes. Thank you very much. See you soon. Thank you. See you soon.